packed agenda tonight. So I guess first we wanted to do roll call, but we also have a new, we can kind of maybe do it together, do roll call, but we also have a new committee member, Avra Jain, and if you want to just introduce yourself to everybody, would love to.
Hi, I'm Avra Jain. I'm really privileged to be part of this important committee. Like I was explaining to Patrick, I am also an engineer by education, so I look at processes very similarly. I always say, as a developer, I'm in the problem-solving business. And I do have a little bit of a unique background in that my father, as I was explaining, used to run the Army Corps of Engineers research laboratories. So as a child, I grew up at the dinner table talking about resiliency, but really environmental impact analysis. And one of the takeaways was when we look at the environmental impact and the solutions, it's not just, you know, the sea level rise but it's really quality of life. It's really about the social impact. So I really look forward to being part of this committee, and it's a real privilege. Thank you.
We're really excited to have you here, and we know this is a time commitment and you're a volunteer, and we just really appreciate the time that you're taking to come and contribute to the city of Miami. And with that, we can do a roll call down the bench. Whoever wants to start, introduce yourselves.
Wayne Pathman, Pathman Lewis. I'm a land use and zoning attorney.
Ronaldo Borges, I'm an architect.
Nkosi Muse, environmental science and policy.
And we also have a committee member watching virtually. Amy Clement is with us. I think not technically officially participating, but watching nonetheless, and we appreciate her taking the time. So I'm going to try my best to kind of stick to the agenda as closely as possible. I'm going to be really trying to stick to our timing. I got some timers, which I'm really excited about. So for our presenters, I find this helpful when I'm at a conference. I'll put your time up here just so you're aware of how much time you have left. We're going to allocate a certain amount of time for when we're having discussions for each member of the committee. So I do apologize in advance. If I cut you off, it's not a personal thing. It's just that we have to make sure that we're allocating about the same amount of time for each member of the committee. So with that, we'll move into agenda item 3, which is public comment. Does any member of the public would like to come and speak at this time? Not yet. We'll have an opportunity for public comment at the end as well. So agenda item 4 is approval of minutes, and we've had those circulated. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read through them.
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye.
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 Any disapproval? No? All right. Awesome. Minutes are approved. Agenda item 5 is old business review and action items. And we're planning for upcoming meetings, locations for the year and proposed topics. And I don't know, I think, Miriam, did Amy want to speak? Was this the item she wanted to speak on, do you know?
Can you hear me?
You can hear us? Did you want to speak about that, Amy, or are you just listening?
I'm happy to give you an update. I think both Kos and I were tasked with this. Maybe Kos wants to go first.
As far as the meeting in Liberty City goes, right?
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
Yeah, I plan on circling back up for that, I guess, because we're going to look in, Amy's doing Overtown in October, I believe, or did we set a solid date for that yet?
I don't think we had a solid date. It was somewhat flexible. We were going to try to do 2 of the remaining ones on the road and 2 of the remaining ones here, and we were flexible.
September. And then I'm October. Okay. Yeah, I was going to circle back for that as time got closer, so we can set up a date for that, and not a date, a location in Liberty City for that.
Okay. Awesome. And Amy, did you have anything to add to that?
I'm still working out the details and with Catalyst, and I wasn't able to yet find a location. I'm still working on it. So I hope to be able to update everyone. I guess our next meeting is September. If it is, then I would say we probably have to move these off-site meetings to either October, November, or December.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay, in either case, we will be having to go somewhere else because this chambers is already booked for City Hall. They requested the room, so now.
So we have to be off-site for September.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Amy, do you think it's feasible for your location for September? Or Kosi, do you think? Or is that not enough lead time?
I'm happy to work on that with partners. I can't promise, but I will coordinate. I'll be in touch with Miriam and let the committee know through Miriam. And if not, she and I can try to come up with a backup plan for September. So I'm happy to take that on.
I'll do the same.
Okay. Awesome. So on this agenda item, we also had proposed topics. I think we have our discussion items in agenda item 9, where we can maybe see where we're at after all of it. We have so many awesome presentations. So maybe we can put any additional conversations, general stuff to then, and that'll allow us to move on to new business. Does that sound okay for everyone? Okay. So new business, we have 3 wonderful presentations. The first one is Impact of FEMA Maps, Flood Risk Categorization in the City, Building and FEMA Departments. We're a little ahead of schedule, but hopefully not too bad.
Good evening, and thank you very much. I believe we have the presentation will be coming in through Zoom, and Miriam, are you able to pull it up? What we have today is based on the request from the committee. We have 2 representatives from FEMA to talk about the process of updating and changing the flood maps. As you know, this is very important as we're looking at our CRC scores and the insurance rates that our residents will have to pay. So with us today is Mark Vieira and Michael Taylor, who are the lead from FEMA on working through the Miami-Dade flood map adjustments, which is something that occurs about every 10 years.
Okay, you hear me all right?
Mark, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you now when we have your slides up.
Okay. Yes, thank you for allowing me to present. Told Mike Taylor that he didn't need to be on. I was just going to do it. Just a little background about myself. I'm a senior engineer with FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta. And I'm the project manager on the coastal studies that we've been doing in Florida. And Mike Taylor works for Compass, which is actually AECOM, and is also the project manager on the contracting side. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the coastal study. A lot of people have asked us, why did we do a new coastal study? Basically, Congress told us that we needed it. Plus, the existing coastal study is 30 to 40 years old. My slides okay?
Yep, we can see your slides.
And back, 30 or 40 years ago when we did the study, we used USGS sheets, nothing against USGS. Those maps just didn't show enough information for us to do a real good study. And the mapping was just basically up to date. One of the things that's really made me excited about these studies is the number of transects. Transects are basically not about a graph. You do a survey coming in. The old the effective maps, the one the coastal study that's 30, 40 years old, had about 30 transects, which really doesn't show what's going on in the Miami-Dade area. The other thing it did not have is what we call the Limois line. And this is an area that we're now showing that we have wave action greater than 1.5, but less than 3 foot. I've got the option in the slide as well. So again, the old study really needed to be updated. There's some things about the study, better defined risk. We use better models. We're using supercomputers to do the work. We have better topography. We're using LiDAR, and we've got a lot better resolution and a lot more ground elevations as part of this new study. And as you'll see, we have 218 transects versus 36. That's quite a bit of difference, and it really shows what's on the ground, and it's just better modeling. We've got more hurricane information than we had when we did those original studies. I've had a chance to talk to one of the guys who did some of the original coastal studies, and he said, yeah, they were pretty good once you hit land. Once you hit land, all bets were off because we just didn't have enough topography. And the maps, the models really did model it as well as the models we use now. This is a copy, or basically of what we're calling a transect. And you can see we start out in the ocean, we get ground elevations coming in. We also determine what's on the ground. Is it mangroves, is there seawalls? Is the ground cover grass? Is it asphalt? What is out there? And these are the areas.
Mark, I'm sorry to be interrupting you, but we seem to be losing the connection with you. It's very difficult to hear you. Keep breaking up. Are you able to improve the connection at all?
No, I don't think so. Better?
Can you say that again? I didn't hear.
Is that any better? Or...
No, I can't understand you at all right now.
Can somebody send me a phone number? I'll call you.
Hey, Mark, what we're going to do is we're going to try and send you a phone number.
Okay.
Give you a way to connect.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question in the meantime? Yeah. So, Alan, I think originally the idea was to understand how the maps may change in different zones. Because, I think most of us are pretty familiar with what he's going through. I wonder if he could sort of focus on that variation, what's anticipated, because, we have different zones in the city. And are we looking at a foot and a half, 6 inches? What's that future looking like? I don't know if he could focus on that instead of all this methodology presentation.
Right. I would say we can send that question to Mark. We did forward to him the questions that you all prepared after the previous meetings. And maybe, I don't know if Mark, if you're able to hear this or not, but maybe you could help to respond to one of our board members' questions.
I was going to get to that in 2 minutes. Not your
Also, I'm interested in this methodology of presentation, so I'm curious whether he's using a computer, just so that we could have, perfect this in the future for others that want to use this method to present. Is he using computer audio, or how is he communicating with us?
I am not sure if we are pushing the slides or he is pushing the slides.
so it's probably a bad internet connection.
Do we have any progress on a phone call? Because we could just hold the phone up to the mic and he could.
We just emailed him the phone number to call in.
Okay.
So he's basically presenting through Zoom.
Yeah. This Mark Farah. What?
Audio's coming through now, so.
Okay, let me go on then. And I was going to get to the questions. Again, this is just, you know, the graphics. Biggest thing, and I think the people in Miami-Dade need to realize, we changed the datum. We used to use the 88 we used to use the 29 datum. We're switching to the 88. With that county in Region 4 that was still using the 29. And the issue there is people are going to get a little confused when they start comparing apples to oranges. So they need to make sure they're using the right data. Let me move on because I know you were asking some other questions. One of the other things that we did as part of this study is we incorporated some work that Miami-Dade did themselves on some watersheds. And I've sent you this presentation so people can look at it because I'm going to go through it real quick to try to get to your answers. One of the other pieces of information that we've given all the communities is this graphic, which basically says changes since last firm. If you can see on this, these areas in blue, these areas are now not going to be in the special flood hazard area. The areas in red will be. And I think this is a very good, important piece of data that we've been giving the communities to help them do some outreach. Just to let you know, we started this study back in 2014, and we're still moving on with it. This slide basically says we haven't started the appeal period yet. We've got to do that, but to do that, we've got to put a Federal Register notice out there. Then once that occurs, we put 2 legal notices in the newspaper, and then we start the 90-day appeal period. We resolve all the appeals, and then we do what we call a 6 months compliance period. So we're still talking 9 months, 90 days, 6 months, and then resolve the appeals. So we're probably still looking at 1.5 years before the maps will go effective. Let me skip to that. An appeal, anybody can file an appeal to the study. But what I always try to tell people that an appeal is, I don't like the map. That's not an appeal. You have to submit scientific and technical data to say our study is incorrect. And basically, we use the wrong assumptions, use the wrong models and all that. Let me skip a couple more of these. This, I think, is very important slide. The Map Service Center is where you can go look at the preliminary maps. But the other one here, the Flood Map Changes Viewer, is something new that we've produced that allows you to go look at the effective map, and then you can pull up the preliminary map, and then you can overlay the two. So I think this is a good tool that a lot of people need to know about to be able to look at the changes. This is one of the questions I think people have asked or sent me, and it basically says, based on the base flood elevations increase, in most cases, flood insurance will decrease as long as they have a base flood elevation. Their floors, structures where the base flood elevation goes up, yep, premiums will change. Well, we also try to tell people that, let's say they're in next zone now, not in the special flood hazard area, and the preliminary maps have showed that we've been in the special flood hazard area. What we try to tell those people is, you need to go ahead and buy flood insurance policy, which is a lot cheaper. be able to keep that.
Sorry, it seems like we're losing the connection again. Was this by phone? Send him another number?
Yeah, we sent another number to try calling in again.
Okay. You've been emailed another number if you can hear us. We can't hear you. We can chat, I guess, while we're waiting, but sort of he hit upon a little bit of the connection between the methodology, if the methodology is sound or not, how, I guess, understanding the methodology is relevant to how the floodplain is determined.
Did you read the second point here? Very interesting. Like, how are the insurance companies going to be able to evaluate all those variables? Is FEMA going to provide flood frequency, multiple flood types, storm surge, coastal erosion, distance to water source?
That's a great question.
It's a lot of variables.
So I guess what I'm understanding is, of course, there's a methodology where they've modeled the community, and they've done that all throughout the coastal regions of Florida. And then that, sort of evolves into a map change. I was trying to understand the calibration of the map change in the context of Miami, right? Because I've seen it for the beach, let's say Miami Beach and Naples and the southwest coast of Florida. And then what impacts does that have to residents that own a place now that have a certain relationship to that map? And then also to bring light to the fact that we did modify Miami 21 zoning, allowing people to build new construction up to 5 feet of freeboard, which is another reason why people should be looking at freeboard, because this sort of future map change is sort of indicating that that's a trend. That's certainly something that is happening, and all insurance risk analysts will tell you that reducing risk by elevating is the way to go in the future as we plan the new city, the new resilient city.
Do we have an update on our connection? We get it? All right. Feeling positive.
Alan, is this a Zoom presentation that he's making? So he's filtering the Zoom through the city system?
Yeah, yes,
That's what we had discussed in the prior meeting, that we could have Zoom participation in these meetings?
He can give a presentation. We can bring people in to present things, but he's not a part of the board. So, and I'll defer to the attorney for probably a better clarification. But board members have to be physically present for purpose of the Sunshine Law. But he's just giving information.
Right. But in the future, if we have guests presenting, they could use the same methodology through Zoom.
Yeah, yes, we can use technology. It's no different than if we were broadcasting a commission meeting out to the public.
Okay. So one thing I'm definitely a fan of that maybe we can consider for future meetings, if the group is open to this, is having presentations that would otherwise be virtual, be pre-recorded, send them to us before the meeting, we can watch them, and then we can reserve the meeting for discussion so that it just saves time. I think we tried that with the Stormwater Master Plan meetings, and I thought it was pretty effective. I know it eats into our personal time outside of the chambers, but personally I find it's a little easier than having to do presentations.
User error, I sent him the wrong phone number, so I just sent him the correct phone number, so hopefully he'll call in. And then if that doesn't work, I will just hold up my phone to a microphone.
Okay. We'll Give it a few more minutes, but we don't want to get too, we're still on track. We could always, I don't know if it makes sense to move ahead in the agenda, and then if, once you figure it out technologically, we can circle back. I'm not sure who, our next presentation on permeable heat resistance, are they here? Or is it?
I am ready to go. I'm fully zoomed up and ready.
I know, you sound very clear as well.
Well, I feel like I've had a little heads up to get all my AV straight for this, so I'm ready.
Is that okay?
I'm on. It says I'm muted. Am I on it?
Is that Mark? Mark, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, it told I was muted.
Ooh, sort of can hear you.
Okay. Let me sound down.
Mark, why don't we give it one more shot, and then if it works, we'll keep going, and if we're having connection problems, we can try to diagnose them and let the next speaker go, and then we can circle back to you. How does that sound?
Now can you hear me all right?
Let's give it a go. I think we can hear you.
Okay. Was asked, again about the insurance. We tell people to go ahead and buy the insurance now. With respect to rating 2.0, there's very different things going on with these maps. So I think one of the questions was asked, is the flood elevations going up or down? Or the same, and all I can say is some areas are going up, some areas are going down, and I don't have a good feel for looking. And that's why I think you need to look at the data that we submit to communities to see the changes since last term. It will help there. One of the questions that was asked was, developers start using the preliminary maps. I would if you were starting to build, because you would hate the flood elevation would go up. But there's some guidance given to the communities about doing that. One of the other questions was about residential versus commercial. Again, you're going to have to look at the maps. We did not didn't analyze which areas are commercial, which areas are residential. So I think that answers most of the questions.
I think if he's using the cell phone, he may need to mute the computer, because I think that's the
Yeah,
echo.
we have a little bit of an echo with you, Mark, but we can hear you better. Is that the end of your presentation, Mark? Mark, can you hear us? Sounds like we've lost him. So why don't we go?
I'm on the computer, but I'm on the phone too.
Oh,
and the phone said I was muted.
Okay, we can. You want to mute your computer, but unmute your phone?
Yeah. It may be, if you went through a Zoom phone number, if you mute the computer, it will, I believe it mutes your phone connection. But I don't hear the echo from him now, so maybe try a question.
Yeah, Mark, could you hear us? I think this is such an important issue that I would hate for us to have lost in translation connection error problems. So as frustrating as it may be, I think we might need to try to move on to the next agenda item. And then if there's ways we can hear him more clearly later on, we can circle back. But I was only getting about 60% of what he was saying. So I think it's such an important issue. We shouldn't.
I thought the idea of getting him on your phone and just putting him on the microphone may work better than this.
Yeah, like a cell phone.
If he's, we're going to dialogue with him with a few simple questions.
if you want us to do that, I can do that. He was coming in clear before on my cell phone, so it's up to you.
Yeah, maybe if you could try getting, you can go off the Zoom, and just call your cell phone, and you just hold it up to the mic. That might be the easiest solution forward. But we have to be mindful of our time and not go too far.
There's Mark. Yeah, it had it muted, and I was getting that echo. That was weird. Okay.
Okay.
It's muted on Zoom now. I'll just get off this. Let me just get off of Zoom. Okay, I'll shut down my computer.
We could, yeah.
Microphone.
Okay, is that better?
Speak again.
I said, is that better?
Oh, you can barely hear him.
Now, is that better?
I think, unfortunately, I think we need to figure this out and have a more clear connection for the conversation. So I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, and then if you come up with anything and we have time at the end, we can circle back. But ideally, maybe we'll reschedule this for the next meeting, and then hopefully have the technological issues sorted out. Does that sound to everybody? Okay. All right. So our next presentation, and sorry, Mark, we weren't able to make it happen, but if you could communicate to him that we are very, very excited to hear what he has to say, and we just need to figure out the tech. All right. So our next presentation is on permeable and heat resistance pavement, and I believe is that a in-person or a virtual?
It is a virtual. Let's see if we can redeem the Zoom qualities here. I'm coming to you from Denver. This is Chris Evers. You guys hear me okay?
You sound great.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully everyone is doing well in Miami. I am in the midst of a cool pavements tour that began visiting places like Los Angeles and Phoenix, and I happened to time it right during a brutal heat wave. So I can't wait to get back to Florida. Actually, it's cooler there than it is some of the places I've been. But anyway, I wanted to spend some time with you. I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit about some of the cool pavements technologies that are out there and some of the advancements. Obviously, resiliency really gets into heat this time of year. Pun intended, we're going to talk about those cool pavements, so I'll just dive right in. Again, my name is Chris Evers. I'm the past president of the American Public Works Association here in Florida. I'm also the executive coordinator for the Florida Pavement Preservation Council. And so really, every day I'm kind of looking at pavements and how we can make our pavements last longer, be more sustainable and resilient. So that's kind of the angle that I'm going to be coming at. I don't have to show anyone here urban heat maps in Miami. You are all used to it. I will tell you that this only one you're not familiar with is on the right-hand side, my FLIR recorded temperatures, pavement temperatures of around 160 degrees in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. So it's absolutely incredible. Keep in mind that as bad as that is, I actually recorded 170 degrees on a pavement that had been sealed with a black coal tar. So we also should be thinking about not only what we should be using, but what we should not be using as well. So really, as far as what we talk about and what I would like to kind of you guys to take away from listening to this presentation, really over the years, Public Works has learned some extremely valuable lessons about how to be more sustainable and resilient. And among them really get to be, of course, the solutions that we deploy have to be safe, both for the environment, humans, and our animal friends, but they also really have to be economically sustainable, long-lasting, and perform as well as, or hopefully better, as our current solutions. And so what I'm going to show you is some exciting technologies that are emerging that can really check those boxes Even so, we have very challenging, times. Obviously, we have budget issues in the time of COVID, and we had already a headwind as it stands. So not all solutions work at scale. Some solutions, one that I'm going to bring up is porous or permeable pavements, do combat urban heat, just like another solution where we're really kind of painting the asphalt white, like a sealing solution. The problem with some of these solutions is how do we get them to work at scale? One of the challenges is pavement design changes that can be very, very expensive. So rebuilding all 670.2 centerline miles of Miami roads with porous pavements, for instance, just for one of the examples, would be anywhere from $1 billion to $1.4 billion. So very, very expensive, a lot of user delays. So what we try to look for is how do we come in and use different technologies that are designed to really retrofit our existing infrastructure. And if we can do that, then we can tip the balance into a more scalable and affordable solution. And remember, most of these solutions, or any solution that's going to be more resilient, you need to be able to add scale. You need to be doing enough of it to really make a difference. And so that's what the company that I work for, Pavement Technology, really focused on when we did that. So just looking at these, I won't spend a bunch of time. You guys are well familiar with some of the budgetary challenges. All of these numbers look big, whether it's 90 million to just maintain what you're probably not satisfied with as it is right now, all the way up to how do we make it better, and these numbers get into the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you look at that, though, by retrofitting some of the existing roads and keeping them in good condition with some of these cool pavement technologies, the numbers are actually much, much smaller. And so that's what we'll focus on. This is not a presentation about the numbers necessarily, but just to show you to scale. So if you look at kind of the top two categories, excellent and good, you want to spend money on the roads while they're in good condition. There's a good reason for that. So here's just a quick slide showing worst first is one of the worst things we can do. That's like waiting till, you basically the paint starts to flake off your car before you change the oil. So same thing with dental care. You definitely want to take good care of your teeth so you don't have to go in for the root canal. So I put a couple examples in there. So by doing something to these roads that are in good condition, the roads also have the longest life cycle. And if we're treating roads with the technology, we want it to be there as long as possible, neutralizing urban heat. And so the other thing that we're going to focus on, because the solution has these capabilities, is air quality as well. One of the things that we see continued problems with is mobile source air pollution. And you can see right here that ozone is now taken over first slot, or transportation has taken over the first slot from energy on ozone creation. So now, what does COVID do? When you lock down for a little bit of time, like we did here in Florida and even throughout the country, air quality got better. We all saw that. There might be other ways that we prefer to do that, though, than using, obviously the lockdown method with COVID. So one of the things that we're deploying is a technology that spray applies a titanium dioxide material, which is photocatalytic, onto the road. And you've seen maybe articles about smog-eating roads or smog-eating buildings. That's what this technology is, and it's going to be coming fast and furious as we get into probably 2022, 2023. So this is what's really exciting, and I wanted to tell you about it. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on photocatalysis. You guys have a busy evening, but what I will say is imagine it's like photosynthesis, but what's happening is there's a catalyst in the pavement, and when sunlight hits the pavement, it reflects the UV radiation, making the pavement and the city cooler, but it also neutralizes NOx emissions. So it's, in essence, cleaning the air and breaking down the NOx emissions. So as I talk, I'm just going to let this play. So imagine the sun is coming down, the sun is being reflected back, the UV radiation is, but also what's happening is it's neutralizing the NOx emissions. We're about 298 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So we focused on CO2, we should, but NOx is really contributing greatly to our visual air pollution. So, and I can tell you I'm in Denver, and it's pretty nasty out here. So that ambient kind of NOx noise is always there, that ozone. But what we want to try to do is get ahead of it. Same thing with urban heat. With urban heat, if we can reflect, just like when you use a 100 SPF UV, which has titanium dioxide in it, it's going to reflect that heat off of the pavement, and that pavement won't get up to 160 degrees is the hope. So I would encourage the committee to consider the city of Miami joining the Global Cool Cities Alliance. Just kind of as a side shoot, we're very involved in that, and that's actually who I've been visiting the last 6 weeks. Is going out and seeing the partnership. So really, this is what we're after. We want to reduce these urban heat islands. We want to bring the temperatures down. Remember, if you have all of that heat locked into that black asphalt pavement, it's going to emit at night. And that's what's going to make the air conditioning in our communities run harder, which in turn exacerbates our air quality problems. So what we do is we spray apply the material down. Our first project in South Florida was actually in Delray Beach, which is pretty exciting. And this is what it does. It penetrates down into the pavement. Again, just to kind of show you that this technology is out there. It's being deployed right now as we speak. And while this pavement is in place, it's going to reduce NOx emissions anywhere from 40 to 60%. That's on a runway in Orlando International. And then it's also going to reflect the heat. So just some final slides here. And if you guys have any questions, guys and gals, 45 to 57% NOx reduction at the Orlando International Airport. And the solar reflective index, which is what the metric is that U.S. Green Building Council uses. Traditionally, very black asphalt would be at around 5 to 10. And the increase was up to around 39 or 40 for the SRI, which well exceeds the heat island reduction points requirement. So what does it look like? The downward facing, here's a shot of my feet. And you can see right here, actually, this is lighter pavement. Funny enough, it also neutralizes any mold and mildew. And since we're in Florida, we had some on the edge of pavement there. So that is the other thing that it did. It actually is what they're using to fight COVID. Fortunately, the pavements are not COVID super spreaders, so we don't have that issue to concern ourselves with. However, one of the another huge benefit that we're just learning about is the ability of photocatalysis to decompose microplastics. I think specifically of Key Biscayne and the health of the bay, and obviously these microplastics are getting everywhere. They've been found in Antarctica even. And so the efficiency of being able to break that material down is anywhere from 85 to as much as 98%. So that's the exciting thing. I just wanted to kind of bring you up to speed on some of this technology, what we're bringing to South Florida. The process of spray applying this also extends the life of the pavement by about 5 years per treatment. And so if you look at 1 mile of titanium dioxide treated road, it's equivalent to planting about a 20-acre forest in so much as its ability to offset the emissions of that vehicular traffic. So pretty exciting. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer some and dive into it. Hopefully I've left enough time.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We have about 7 minutes or so for questions, so we got a good amount of time. Does anyone on the committee have some questions?
Yeah, you said that it extended the life of the asphalt by 5 years. So every 5 years we have to redo it? I mean, so what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. So already in South Florida, many of the communities have been using an asphalt rejuvenator, which is the foundational piece of this technology. What we're adding is the titanium dioxide. So in our early testing, it looks like the titanium dioxide, once it's spray applied onto the pavement, that is going to last for longer than that 5-year cycle. But already in Florida, many of our communities have been using this technology to extend the life of their pavements. So that second treatment for them would be, like, for instance, Miami Gardens, they would be, the second treatment would not include titanium dioxide. So in many of the new communities, what we're doing is we're putting titanium dioxide in all of their spray applications, and that preserves the asphalt binder. Really, that asphalt binder is oxidizing because of the extreme heat and the sunlight that we get in Florida. So the cost I think is one of the other things. If you look at the cost to basically spray apply this onto the pavements, it might be around $15,000 per mile of treatment, whereas resurfacing the road might be $100,000 to $120,000, depending on whether you have to do ADA ramps, other types of pavement related repairs to the pavement. So it's very, very cost effective.
Have you done a study on Miami and how often they're re-asphalting every year? Do you know what the demand is from Miami?
Yes. So actually, I've been working with. That's how I came to you guys as an invite through Public Works. And so some of this data, I'm going to just go back real quick. Some of this data is directly from the city of Miami. One of the challenges is that I think you are receiving about $1.4 million worth of resurfacing money per year. And other communities that are your size, I would say, in mileage, like the city of Orlando, are receiving about $5 million for the same type of work. So right now, it seems that Miami is underfunded as far as the resurfacing aspect of the program. What I specialize in, is getting together with staff, finding ways that we can stretch the dollars by using some of this alternative technology. This is one of the top things that we were able to find, because if you basically save the good roads while they're in good condition, it costs much, much less than having to take these failed pavements and try to pay enough money to bring them up to the top here.
Are you working with FDOT?
Yes, we did a study with FDOT back in 2019, and then we're actually getting ready to start some more studies. We're actually working with the city of Los Angeles that has 23,000 lane miles, so we have our work cut out for us there. But many of these agencies throughout both the state and the country are already actively doing either pilot programs or full projects.
Good. Kosi, you got a question?
Yeah, I'll squeeze one in really quick. So I'm sure, as you probably already know, Florida has a water problem. So
yes,
permeable pavement sounds great, but I guess how would it work differently in Florida than it might, in another state that isn't constantly inundated with water, and we're not worrying about where water goes underground and things of that sort?
Yes, that's a great question. And one of the things that why I put permeable pavements in the beginning was, it was my understanding that there have been some discussions about it. It can work in limited instances. We think that this approach, which is more a retrofitting spray application, is going to be a lot more cost effective. Permeable pavements, one of the biggest problems is the real structural challenges. When you build something that's porous, it also has some strength problems unless you build the base to a point where you've got a lot of structure underneath there. You bring up another great point, though, is we also have a lot of sand and debris. Obviously, we're close proximity to the beach. And so if we're not careful, this permeable pavement can fill up the voids with road debris. So typically, it requires added maintenance, sweeping with the vac truck. And so a lot of times that solution, that permeable or porous pavement, is just not a very easily scalable solution to deal with the urban heat that Miami's experiencing.
thank you so much for the presentation.
Absolutely.
One quick question is, any impacts with runoff in terms of like the chemical treatments that go into the material, and if you get rain, are there any runoff issues that can then get into the groundwater supply?
One of the biggest problems with runoff, as you know, with hot pavements is superheated stormwater. So if we can cool the pavement and the pavement is clearing that water faster, then we're not going to have the algae blooms and some of the runoff issues. The other thing that we're really excited about, and we're doing all of our early studies on, is if we can decompose these microplastics, then we will have a lot cleaner runoff once we get to the point where most of these microplastics are coming from road debris like tires and obviously brake pads. And even, unfortunately, even EVs create microplastics. So in that regard, we're always going to be left with a challenge with microplastic pollution.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
we
thank you.
really appreciate your time. It's really exciting stuff.
It is.
And is this something, Alan, what sort of next steps might we have for testing or implementing or experimenting with this type of technology? Adaptation action areas, are there opportunities where we might be able to experiment with this to see its impact?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Chris Bennett. What we need to do is we need to take some of the areas that we've already identified as having some heat island effect issues, which we have done heat studies in the city, and identifying some roads that qualify in terms of their existing conditions, not to get into technicalities, but like a PCI score, pavement condition score, upwards in the 70s and 80s. In other words, a good road. And then find the budget that we can use to actually do a section or a couple of sections of road in that area of known heat problems, and actually test it before and after for several months and see how the heat island effect has decreased. Of course, as Chris Evers mentioned, or shall I say pointed out, we do have an extremely limited budget right now just for our annual resurfacing contract as it is, which is why it's hard for us to keep up with maintaining the existing 600 plus miles of road that we have today. However, this is definitely something that we want to do because a simple milling and resurfacing or full-fledged roadway reconstruction program is not the way to maintain 600 miles of road. You do need to do these intermediate rejuvenation treatments upwards of 2 to 3 times in the beginning years of the life cycle of a road, which, by the way, is about 20, give or take 20 years if we're lucky here in Miami. So you do this in the first 15 years at least 2 times, 3 times, at 1/10 the price of a milling and resurfacing project. You have basically saved yourself easily 50% plus over the 20-year lifespan of that roadway in terms of cost to actually maintain it. And that still includes the reconstruction 20 years down the road. So long story short, we need to find an area which we know of some areas that could use this, and then determine how much of our current resurfacing budget we can afford to spend on essentially a pilot to prove its worth. And then from there, most likely it's going to come out positive, then work on expanding our budget to where it really needs to be.
Is that something that you could maybe follow up with us on once you identify an area you think is a good candidate, and then we could try to find ways that we could support that effort, whether it's through a resolution or however we can be supportive to move that forward?
Yeah, I see that being feasible for sure. Like I said, since we have heat island data for most of the city, and also we do have, as of 2 years ago, the PCI indexing of the entire city's catalog, we should be able to identify an area that would probably be a good candidate for sure.
And I'm going to remind all the committee members, one thing I really want to emphasize is individual members taking on projects. I know Nkosi, you're a heat expert. I wonder if this item might be something, I don't mean to put you on the spot, just sort of thinking out loud, but if that might be an item that you want to kind of quarterback and see through implementation. By no means have to, just sort of a suggestion. It seems really aligned with your expertise.
Yeah, this amongst
Patrick.
other.
Yes, Amy, you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was also going to jump in and just before we go down that road of asking also Chris a question. Is that okay?
Sure.
It should be fine.
Or Chris and Alan, so we heard a lot about the roadway changes associated with the stormwater master plan. Is there any opportunities to, you know, is there any opportunities to leverage here as we're replacing roads that are being dug up for drainage to be replacing them with these different materials?
I would say yes, there's an opportunity. Now, remember, these are more of a rejuvenator, in other words, life-extending materials that you're using to treat the pavement. However, there's no reason why you couldn't, part of your stormwater projects will also include roads that aren't being completely tore up. So you could resurface those roads with these materials. Mr. Evers may be able to correct me on this, but I do believe that there is actually some of these materials with the titanium dioxide mixed in actually for the pavement itself too. But outside of that, what I would say is when we do these projects, what we need to do is we need to put them on our calendars for in 5, give or take, years after that roadway is reconstructed. And we spent so many millions on the new road with the new drainage systems that we come back in those first 5 years just automatically and treat it with the rejuvenator. Now, granted, that gives you 5 years of hot black asphalt, but at the same time, you know, doing this on top of a brand new road just, of course, increases the cost of that construction. So we could either apply it immediately at the beginning of a project, which is not really necessary, or, like I said, slate it for year number 5 on a brand new road and then come back. So while that extends the length of time, we have to wait in order to realize the benefits of the titanium as well as, you know, for the heat island effect reduction. That would be my recommended steps is we do a massive stormwater project, use the product where we're just resurfacing, and then come back and use it in approximately 5 years and really do a massive area like that.
Yeah, and we hope to be able to unlock some federal air quality money and other EPA money to help agencies to, you know, basically help pay for this. So a lot of the other agencies that we've been working with have basically looked at, okay, well, we could spray apply this material, a different formula, but on the brand new road as part of construction, and then we could immediately get the benefit of their urban heat reduction. So we have several different product formulations. So a new road can be spray applied. It wouldn't have to have the asphalt rejuvenator as Chris stated, as that would be something we would do a few years you know, into the future.
Awesome. Fascinating stuff. I'd love to keep talking about it, but we unfortunately have to move on to our next presentation. Thank you again so much for the presentation. Really interesting. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have a presentation I believe we're all very excited to see on Jose Marti Park. I believe that is an in-person presentation with a previous board member. So great to see you.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? We're very excited to be here tonight. My name is Mariana Boldu, and I am the project manager for Jose Marti Adaptive Redesign. I have my full team here. Aida Curtis, our principal, is here on the second row, along with Yannick Cederberg from Cummins and Cederberg, our coastal engineers, and Patrick Shear, our civil and stormwater management expert. We have a lot of things to go through. This is the second time we're here presenting to you. Last time we were sharing our vision. Tonight we're giving you an update. So I will just dive right in. Here you see an image of the park on East Little Havana with our proposed design overlaid. So I'm gonna go through the agenda for tonight. We're gonna remind you of the project goals, a little bit of the findings on the community outreach, the vision, the design, where we're at on the timeline, where we stand today. Then we're gonna dive into a lot of how we're gonna make this possible, a lot of technical findings and legal aspects that are gonna come up to City Commission on July 20th. So we're gonna go through all of them and explain them to you so you understand them and you can give us your support. Then we're gonna briefly talk about funding, the benefits, and the importance of this project. So project goals. We were commissioned to look at this project through these 3 E lenses, economy, ecology, and equity, and define a toolbox of climate adaptive design solutions that could be a resource for all South Florida to live with water in a different form. So with that framework, we engaged the community through a series of community outreach events. We have started in 2019 with a peer review of experts. I see some of the people that participated on that sitting here on the audience. And then we engaged the community through a picnic, and we have 2 different community outreach engagements with them. Through all of them, these are just the main takeaways of things that came up. So through the economy, there was a lot of conversation about protecting local vendors, but at the same time providing opportunities for local markets in the park, revenue opportunities for the community and especially for the ADA community, to have an affordable kayak launch, which is part of the scope of the fine grind, which is the first phase of the project, and secure affordable housing around the park, which goes completely beyond the project, but it was mentioned quite a few times. On ecology, the biggest takeaway was water quality and how the people in the community was so in tune with understanding what was going on and the quality of the water on the river and how it affected them. There was a lot of conversation and preference, to our surprise, very strongly towards nature-based solutions and conversations about living shorelines and oyster restoration. A lot of wildlife mentioning, especially the kids were very, very, very adamant about seeing butterflies on the park and enjoying the manatee sightings that they have currently. There were mentions about the shade and the heat island effect and how so much of the park was paved and the need to have more shade. Less paving and more green, and green not only on planting and trees, but also green infrastructure and how that ties everything together. Equity, yet again, water access was the main conversation for a neighborhood that has such a wonderful park at the edge of the river, and that's their house. So they go there every time to enjoy it. And a lot of security improvements and better access and connectivity. What you're seeing here in the screen was our schematic vision for the park. So I'm going to highlight very quickly the south living shoreline, the water taxi in the middle of the park, then a north living shoreline and a kayak launch towards the north. And I just want to remind you, our toolbox was structured around the 4 main strategies of collecting the water and treating it, protecting the park and the edge of the coastal improvements, cooling the park and the neighborhood by providing a wonderful oasis of shade, and connecting people to the neighborhood, people to the water, and people to nature. I'm just going to talk briefly about the protect strategy because it's one of the major driving forces. I could spend, and the people here with me could give you dissertations on each one for a few hours, so that's not going to happen tonight. You can see we have 3 different strategies to protect the edge here. So number 1, it's our north living shoreline, which is going waterwards in some areas from the mean high water line today. So we're going into the water on that portion. Then we have the middle section, which is our living seawall. So we're building a new seawall through that portion. And you can see here, we are proposing living mangrove panels to recruit life through that intervention. And then going south, we have underneath I-95 our second living shoreline planter, which is landward of the current edge of the park. So this is a different condition and a different strategy. And it doesn't have mangroves, which the north one has, but it's just coastal marshes underneath the I-95. So you can see here's a toolbox of all the different options, and just showing you how in a very contained small park you can test and you can validate that every condition calls for a different solution. To get there, we had to do a lot of different things in our investigation to make it possible. Here you just see a revised site plan of all those interventions, including number 13, which is the kayak launch on the north, and then the whole harmonization of this coastal edge that gets raised. So I'm gonna very briefly touch up on how we're doing that. So on the south living shoreline, we're keeping the seawall elevation, the existing seawall at the elevation that it's at today, so that's 265, and we're going landward with a new seawall on the back of the living shoreline planter at elevation 450 for the most part. When it starts reaching the pool towards the end, it starts ramping up to 6, and that's the elevation of the new seawall all around through the park. The only portions that you have 450 is where you have the openings for the viewing platforms that you see on the north living shoreline and the access to the floating boardwalk that goes down and treats that whole compound as a 360 educational classroom for the north living shoreline. Just very quickly, some visuals for you to understand how all these pieces come together. So you see, the first one is an aerial, but then you can see the viewing decks looking to First Street Bridge north, and the floating boardwalk coming in front of the living shoreline. Then you can see the water taxi around the pool. We have to realign and get into the water on that nook to provide a 15-feet wide river walk that is mandated for the on the new guidelines. Then on the lower right, it's the access to the kayak launch that is aligned with Southwest 2nd Street. Here, just another visual from the north living shoreline, but just looking to the I-95, and then another one right below looking underneath I-95, so you can see how the two different shorelines are quite different on approach. And then just, some other areas on the park, our main plaza around the existing pavilion and just a market underneath I-95. Where we're at today, we're by the day going towards 90% agency permits to be able to have permits on hand by September 15. It's a struggle by the day, and we're working really hard, but I guess what I wanted to highlight here for you, it's our plan, our, what they call it, omnibus resolution that is gonna come up to commission meeting on the 22nd. And I will go through all of those pieces. So how we're gonna make all this happen? We have found with our wonderful team of coastal engineers 21,903 square feet that are new and are owned now by the city. And how we went about this is through the Butler Act disclaimer. It's a legal instrument that if you can prove that you can see on your left the aerial from 1951 and on your right 2021 today, and you see 3 polygons. So those 3 polygons are formed by 2 lines. On the landward side, the back of the polygons is the 1922 shoreline, and on the water side, it's the edge of the shoreline of 1951. So you can see the park extended all the way to what that aerial is showing you. So that's part 1, part 2, and part 3, the 3 different parcels that add up to the 25,000 square feet that you see there. So the state has already transferred this land to City of Miami, and the first portion of the resolution is gonna be the acceptance of this new land that you're gonna have. That had allowed us to trade, and there's where the second part comes around, the land swap. So on this exhibit, you see in orange highlighting area 1, area 2, and area 3. Those 3 pieces are waterward of the Butler Act parcels. So they are on sovereign submerged lands. And we wanted to have them on the park because what we're proposing goes, to the edge of those 3 little orange polygons. So a little bit more in detail, the further north one is a little bit of a nook that you see there to be able to tie back to the parcel on the north and be able to stabilize the kayak launch, area that we have right there in that portion. Here you can see what that looks like today, and we're kind of, going a little bit out onto sovereign land, and that's why we're trading that little piece along with the other 2 that I'm going to show you here. So area 2, it's going landward of the CN line. It's the Butler Act, parcel edge. And as you can see on your right, the proposed alignment of the new seawall, goes a little bit waterward. So we're using that little, piece of the polygon to be able to have a seawall that goes a little bit further into the water, to be able to have the 15 feet setback that is required because we have the existing pavilion right in there trying to, it's a constraint. The other polygon, area 3, on the right, you can see the mean high water line in blue. You have actually built in submerged land without being authorized to do that in the past. And then we're coming a little bit outside, so there is a little bit of new construction and a little bit of fixing the old that we're doing there. So those 3 parcels, and you can see right here what we're talking about on area 3, those 3 parcels we are exchanging with the state. For the pink one, the little one that you see below, that comes to 869 square feet. So the ratio of exchange is 2.5 because the state always wants more, but they are happy what we were offering because of all the public benefits that this project brings on board. So that's the second portion of the legislation that is going to come up. So we have the Butler Act disclaimer, the land swap, and then we have what we call the submerged land lease. So this is on the kayak launch area, and the polygon in yellow is showing you how much of the kayak launch, the viewing deck, and the floating boardwalk are going waterward from the Butler Act parcel. So on those areas, we're going to be leasing the use of that, of those structures over, the state land. So that's the third piece of the legislation. We have always, had analyzed, on all these very complex exercise with many polygons here, so don't get lost. What is really important here is that the 3 at the top, A, B, and C, they come up to 2,712 square feet of park land gain. We're not losing any land, we're gaining you 2,712 square feet of upland on the park. And then the one highlighted in cyan, it's the F parcels, that is how much the Butler Act disclaimer, it's gaining for City of Miami as ownership, 14,773 square feet of new submerged land. Another portion of all these back and forth with the agencies, and this is with DERM, we have tried to claim historic slips. So we went into investigating into the past how many slips and what kind, where they are at the park, and we leveraged and tried to ask for 18 slips, knowing that there was barely a chance because at the same time, there is the Manatee Protection Plan states that you, from 1984 forward, you can only have one slip per every 500 feet of shoreline, or one per parcel, whichever is more restringent. So and this came up as last week, the end of last week, they finally came with a determination saying, it doesn't matter how many slips you show us in the past, because the park has been built on 83, and from 84 forward, you have no historic slips legal claim to make. So we're gonna give you 2 slips, and that's what the conversation came about. We're actually, as the proposed design is now, using 1 for the water taxi landing. This is not complex enoug without mentioning that part of the park is being leased to FDOT underneath I-95, and they have what is called the Memorandum of Agreement of what they can and cannot do as far as improvements underneath the I-95. So the parcel that you see in red, it's the area that falls within the park improvements that is on the lease with FDOT. So we're going with them through what is called the letter of no objection. So they need to say they agree with improvements, and it needs to go through the Federal Highway Administration, and that whole process is another ball game, but it's another portion that is gonna come up on this package of things that are gonna be presented to City Commission. Here, a little bit of an enlargement so you can see how little bit of the portion it is, and yet how much work has given us to get it there. And with that, I would like to pass it on to Aida so she can talk to you about why this is so important to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Good evening. My name is Aida Curtis. I'm with Curtis and Rogers. So what we're coming here with this presentation, and we're asking for your support when this project comes presented to the City Commission. And we want to highlight to you why is this important? Why is this significant? First of all, our team, together working with the grants department from the city, acquired $13.5 million of a grant money from the CDBG grants for our resilient and adaptation actions on this park, and equity in that. We have a Florida Inland Navigation grant, which is about $150,000. And then we have a Miami Forever bond, which is $1 million put towards this park. That's close to $15 million that we already have in the books. We are also pursuing another $2.5 million grant from FINE, again, because of the resilient and adaptive improvements that they're making on this park. So close to $20 million is being secured for this park. So we have the money. We have the money to do this. And ultimately, we were charged with an adaptive redesign of the park that would provide a toolbox of solutions. And so we have a toolbox of solutions that help mitigate sea level rise, storm surge, wave attenuation, tidal flow, repeated elsewhere in the city. We also have a toolbox of solutions for stormwater management. We are doing combinations of green and gray infrastructure. We are storing water, and we are cleaning the water before it goes to the river. We also doing a lot of tree plantings and a lot of light payments for heat island mitigation. We have carbon sequestration, we have greenhouse reduction, and we are also increasing the biodiversity and wildlife habitat for the area. All of these are wonderful, wonderful contributions for the city and for the neighborhood. In addition to that, our proposed design is incorporating all types of educational signage within the park, signage that talks about the history of the Miami River history, the Little Havana history, that talks about what we're doing in terms of water quality and stormwater management, that talks about what we're doing in terms of sea level rise, tidal flooding, and that talks all about the wildlife that's there and the marine life environment that we hope to create with our design panels for this. So we are celebrating our legacy. We want to, tell everybody that we live in the water, that we have viewing platforms, we have floating decks, we have kayak launches, we have places where the children can walk, and shaded areas, concerts. We are really improving the connectivity of this park. So, why is this important? Of course, we are convinced, but so why is it important? So we calculate the Miami River within the city of Miami limits is 27 miles. Only 6% of that is publicly accessible to the water. And out of that 6% that's public, Jose Marti is a little bit more than 10% of that. So in the scheme of things, it's really small, but it's such a big contribution and such a big demonstration what we're trying to do. I mean, this is going to be the first adaptive redesign project in the city of Miami. It's led, designed, and permitted by local Miami firms. No out of town, no big firm, local Miami firms. This is the first project that we know that is really pushing the envelope and, proposing and permitting innovative ideas with the agencies that have traditionally been very conservative. At a time when we are in a pandemic, we cannot negate that. We have been doing all of these negotiations during very challenging times. We have, like I say, we have already secured in hand $15 million ready to build, and we have another 2.5 or more for grants that we apply. This is a toolbox. It can be replicated anywhere if we have a similar situation for sea level rise, for living shorelines, different types of living shorelines, shaded, non-shaded, panels. This is going to be the first project in the state of Florida that is seeking the WEDGE certification, which is the acronym for Water Edge Design Guidelines, which is a measurable parameter, measurable certification that you reach, very similar to a LEED certification of the sorts, but this is for water projects that talks about equitable access, talks about economic advantages, talks about resilient design and resilient maintenance. And this is a program that got started maybe about 8 years ago, and there's a few parks, of course, in the East Coast that have gotten these certifications. It's going to be the first one in Florida. We're already in ways of getting that. And really, we need to start showcasing these things because, everybody's looking to what Miami is doing, and we're doing it. So thank you very much. With this, we want your support. I don't know if it's a resolution, if it's a vote, but we want to make sure that we get your support.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's very, very impressive body of work. And I think, at least personally, it reflects, I think, a very important general strategy that I think this committee's always been supportive of, is that we need to be championing access. We talk a lot about the natural resources we're trying to protect, but if we have limited access to those resources, it's really hard to get stakeholders to get engaged and push for these things if they don't even have access to them. So, and then on top of that, having, these types of innovative strategies to deal with our most at-risk areas, this edge area that's going to be potentially prone to flooding, that seems like just a win-win situation. So I'm extremely supportive of it. We have a few minutes for questions. I'd love to open it up to members of the committee. We don't have too much time, so please try to be succinct in 1 to 2 minutes is about as much time as we can have per person.
I had the privilege of being part of the first studies that were done on Jose Marti Park. I don't know if the rest of the board is familiar, but it was actually the commissioners that had led this right after the hurricane. I own the Miami River Inn across the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so, and when the water surge came in on that last hurricane, we took in over 3 feet of water on our property.
Yes.
So this became the first project, and I will vouch for the community outreach. It was like a 3-year process. I was on the committee that did that. So kudos to the city for initiating that, the commission for initiating that, and I mean, this is, you know, fantastic. I guess the question that I would have, and maybe we could ask the commissioners, is I know there was a special area plan for the project next door in exchange for valuing, putting the Jose Marti Park in part of the square footage requirements. And there was about a, if I recall, about a $6 or $7 million commitment on behalf of the developer, specifically for Jose Marti Park. Raymond Jungles had done the design. I'd like to know, like, maybe if you've raised 15, maybe there's another park that can meet them, but I'd like to know to the chair, like, where does that commitment come in with regards to this toolbox?
I can tell you what I know. So that project is in fact to the south of the project, and it's just getting started right now, just getting back on the ground. And originally, the commitment was for to do the Raymond Jungles design. Of course, that didn't have all the resiliency goals and all the adaptation goals that were set for this one. So the city then went through the outreach process and then hired a consultant, hired our team to do this plan now. So that is still in the works, and it is a negotiation that then the city needs to do with the developer and see, okay, we're not doing the design, we have this value, where do we put it? And there has been conversations of maybe even them managing the construction, or, you know, definitely, you know, different alternatives like that. So I know that is there, that the commitment is there. I don't know how it's going to end up in what.
Yeah, it was a special benefits. It was a resolution. So
yes.
I would just, you know, suggest to the chair or whoever's involved that, because that just means it would give more money for
absolutely
for other parts. But I'd like to know where that special benefit plays into this renovation.
Other questions, comments?
I have a quick question. I saw that it said something about water treatment. Is that water treatment for, I guess, for the purposes of the park, or for releasing it back into the Miami River?
It's for releasing it back to the Miami River, and I know Patrick is here. He can tell you a little bit more about it. I'm not even going to pretend to talk.
You're fine. Excellent question. Excellent question, and thank you, especially regarding the permeable pavement presentation that preceded us. But regarding your question, we're going to be treating the storm water at the park and not the drinking water, maybe, or not the sewage water. And really, we're treating on-site runoff for the several acres of the park, but also about 100 acres of neighborhood runoff will be treated. And some of the improvements, just to keep it brief, are advanced treatment baffle boxes, and that's how we're treating the off-site neighborhood runoff. And we have nutrient filtration in those, and they're also going to be public education exhibits, because they have viewing windows that people in the public can observe how much trash is filling up, and they'll be able to see it floating above the king tide. And so that'll be really interesting for them. And we're also using permeable pavement throughout the park, a little bit more armored type than the type that was presented to you today. The type that we've chosen is actually designed for hydrostatic pressures for when the groundwater in the tide does rise up, and we've placed the pavement, which it will be above king tides and above king tide with freeboard, so that even on those type of instances like Irma, we've designed it to be above the elevation. And during the project design, we had a gentrification meeting where one resident actually lived right on Southwest 4th Avenue, and he had flooding up to his doorsteps. And that's basically, we have the Riverwalk above that, but we also have some drainage wells that will act as redundant backup features to help the drainage within the neighborhood. And basically, we're also putting tidal backflow preventers on the outfall pipes from the river, so that there will be way less riverine flooding, which is some of the main causes with those issues. So hopefully that answers in a nutshell. Okay, thank you.
Good job, Patrick.
Ida, out of the 15 million or so that you have outlined there, what's the actual cost of the project to date? Do you know that number?
right now our estimate for the project is 18 million, but it includes the soft cost. So it's probably going to be the hard cost, the 15 million.
I see.
The hard cost.
So, I mean, my thoughts and my compliments to your team. It's a world-class project by local consultants, which is fantastic, right? We
I think so.
We always,
I think we all Miamians.
Yes, indeed. So that's a great point. It's also so important to have these demonstration projects, you know, where we could take our children and those that still don't understand how we could protect, you know, a coastal city from the impacts of climate. This is so important. So it has a great educational value to the community. So certainly I don't know if we've drafted a resolution yet. Is there language for a resolution yet?
I believe their city staff had drafted a resolution, or there was...
No, Chair, because this will actually just be a review and a recommendation to the City Commission. Upon the board's, whatever they decide, their resolution, I'll just memorialize and the chair will sign. If you want to put conditions, or if you want to put, but it would really just be a review and either approval or rejection, or a review and approval with conditions.
Now,
Very strong review and approval.
because this committee has two functions. One is the resiliency committee, and we also have a coastal review power or something?
Correct. You review all projects on the waterfront.
Right. Yeah. So this is under that.
Correct.
Aspect
Section 2 of your powers.
So this is a waterfront advisory board issue.
Right.
Well, it's both. It's both.
Both, yeah.
So we're supportive on both sides of that. Okay.
I believe this is the first one that has come before us as our new role when we merged our water advisory board role. Okay. Did you have more to say?
Yes, just one thing to note, and the learning here, of course, from the presentation, the details of how you've had to deal with so many layers of bureaucracy and approvals, right? It really brings to light how difficult it is for us to have creativity in these things. All the regulatory agencies and how difficult they are to deal with, and this kind of demonstrates that as well. So it's a learning there, teaching us all how the future of modifying our edge, right, as the city meets the waterways that we have, how difficult it is, you know, to have innovation and to have this kind of intelligence and this kind of application of a demonstration project that is so important. So that is amazing. I mean, I would probably ask you how much of your time has been dedicated to the creative process versus the bureaucratic nonsense that you have to deal with, and you're probably like 70%, you know, bureaucratic process versus 30% creative process, right?
20 hours out of a 24-hour day, I can tell.
Right. So it's
unfortunately, that's a challenge, but in projects of this nature, it's even more challenging because unfortunately, we need to rush it because we have this deadline for a grant that we need to meet the permitting, but you know, there's a lot of dialogue, and there's cross-disciplinary dialogue, there's cross-agency dialogue, because they, you know, it's just kind of.
In the early concept, there was an architectural, kind of like an observation tower. Did that get value engineered?
Those are still on the books for a future phase. This is what we're calling, our first phase of resiliency and adaptation. There's the full park includes, you know, the interpretation towers, includes a different pavilion, possibly a cafe, includes playgrounds, splash park, includes different other elements, and even the streetscape design right there that, you know, will again capture more of the stormwater. But this was the first park. This is the coastal resiliency adaptation that we're working on right now.
So, yes.
Oh, sorry, through the chair. Just two questions. I think this checks all the boxes. I think you guys have done an amazing job, and really one of the only times I've ever heard we've gained land.
Gained parkland, yes.
Yeah, without having to buy it. Has there been any objections from the River Commission or from, I guess, the representatives of the area? No? Yes?
I think there's been concerns regarding taking full advantage of what the possibility of slips was at one point. But of course, Durham has done that determination that, you know, we can only have a maximum of 2. We are already using 1 for the taxi slip. So it's all of those regulations, and it's the, are we doing enough or should we be doing more? Do we have the opportunity to do more? I mean, there's been a concern that has been raised about, you know, that. But I think as the chits fall, you know, Durham essentially made a determination. We just want to make sure that, you know, that people understand that every component has had a value to the process, and it's really a toolbox of solutions. So it may not be like any other project that you say, okay, well, let's just remove this piece from this pie because I don't like that piece. It's not as simple as that, because that piece is part of an integrated system that provides the protection. So it's not remove this and put this or add that. It's not as simple as take this tree out and put this other tree. So that may be a little bit different than other projects because it's been designed as a system. So
one question I have, as this is our first Water Advisory Board matter, how does this process work in terms of, do we vote? Is it in the same way that as we do a resolution?
You must take a vote, yes. And to expand on that, so you would be advising, you can also advise the commission. For an example, and this is not a suggestion, just as an example, perhaps you would say, we recommend the approval of this project with the City Commission listening to the Miami River Commission Committee's concerns, or adding additional slips. You can advise the City Commission. Of course, they're not bound by it, but so you would make a motion to either approve, reject, recommendation to the City Commission, and you can also provide certain points of advice on the specific design.
So, Avraf, well, and please ignore my ignorance on what you were bringing up about the SAP next door. Do you think there should be some type of verbiage implemented into our recommendation regarding that?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, right? So, I mean, this was fantastic. And so obviously we'd love to propose a resolution to, approve the plan as presented. I was very thoughtful. And just maybe add that, that the advisory board would like to pose the question to the commission as to where do the public benefits come from the neighboring project and how they can contribute to this project.
I think that's an excellent contribution. And that's, I believe, that was an official motion.
I'll second it. I mean, I think the answer for...
I apologize. When you say the public benefit component, are you talking about that 6 million specifically, or more public benefit for the actual project?
On the SAP next door, there was a specific dollar amount committed to Jose Marti Park.
So it'd be for the covenant.
Yeah, it was in the approvals. I don't know if you remember, Jose, but so that I would ask that the commission, apply those public benefit dollars towards this project and maybe expanding on this project.
So we had I believe, a resolution. I believe I heard a second.
I'll second it.
And then,
Ronaldo, you had a comment? No. Oh, okay. Second it.
So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None? Very exciting. Well done.
Thank you.
Good work.
Okay, so moving right along, we're a little bit behind schedule. Our next item was related to the topic of cost-benefit analysis and the topic of managed retreat, which Jose had brought up in our previous meeting. And we were discussing how we could make sure that managed retreat was a tool in the toolbox for the city in their planning. After that meeting, I was doing some reading and trying to familiarize myself with, if we were to recommend something, where would it go? How could it be incorporated? And one thing I came across was, and I believe Amy brought this up, was in the Miami Forever Climate Ready Strategy, Managed Retreat is listed as an official tool. Yeah, Jose.
So, okay, when for Alan's purposes, we need it codified. It can't be a resolution. It can't be in a document. It needs to be an ordinance that is codified and put somewhere in. The same thing happened in the seawall ordinance, and that's why it was important to be added, because natural barriers were just not in the code. You could do them, but you could be challenged, you can have legal issues, and this is something that is like so, like a time bomb, that it's, well, it's a powder keg, I guess is the biggest concern. So this is, for the tool in the toolbox, it needs to be just added language. This is something that we can spend months talking about, and I think we should, but what I fear is that, and I know there's a specific, and I don't want to call out the one place, the one area, but I know there is one house at the end of a block in Coconut Grove. And they may have to build a pump station. They may have to, buy the house next door, make a pump station to pump out and keep that road dry for that one house, because that's a responsibility of the city. We have to keep our services to our residents tip-top shape. And we're doing that for one home, and we're spending 4 or 5 times the cost of that one home just to keep it dry. And there is the same topic kind of came up earlier with the titanium dioxide and the roads and permeable pavement. We have more poor roads than we have roads that are usable. And when we get into the conversation about spending all this money, when we can't even keep up our own house, I'm working in the building department now. Maintenance is the conversation. So when we kind of overextend ourselves without even giving us the option and the tools to take that first step. And that's the impetuous, that's why I wanted to talk about it and say, hey, let's just, the first step, allow the tool in the toolbox. Then we start really examining what would managed retreat look like for the entire city.
So where I got, and this could be my lack of understanding of sort of the specifics and the granular details of policy, what does it mean to introduce the topic of managed retreat, like specifically? Like if we were to try to craft a resolution, where would that language then go in terms of the city's tools, so to speak?
I believe the original reso that I proposed said something to allow for the city of Miami to use managed retreat as an option in the climate ready or something like that. But it ultimately would go to Resilience and Public Works to come back with a plan as to where it would go. I'm assuming it would go into Miami 21 and somewhere in...
Yeah, it would probably also go in section 22-5, which is where a lot of these resilience topics end up going, resilience sustainability.
Okay.
So chapter 22 of the code.
In terms of process, so say I agree with everything that you're saying. I think that managed retreat as a topic, it gets very, very complicated. But if you can't even have the conversation, we're not going to go anywhere with it. So I think if I understand you correctly, what you're proposing is just to have the language existing so that then the city can then do the complicated work, which is figuring out how to use it. Is that correct? I think that's a pretty reasonable recommendation. I forwarded along, there was a paper by Dr. Catherine Mock that was recently published in Science, and it was, I thought, a very compelling argument framing the topic of managed retreat in the context of all the other adaptation strategies that we spend quite a bit of time speaking. And it seems like a very important tool. So I'm supportive of this. I'm curious how the rest of the committee feels.
Does our advisory capacity end on managed retreat once it becomes something that's part of the code? Or is this something we can continue to have a conversation about once it does pass? Because
I mean, I think you could do both. It's one thing that this is kind of part of the lexicon of what we do. I know it's usually seen, it's kind of a bad word for a lot of reasons. But I think for we give a recommendation. Alan, what would you prefer? A recommendation for an actual ordinance that comes to us, and then we pass as a recommendation to the city commission?
I would say definitely it needs to be an ordinance, and you know, we do have it in the climate resilience strategy, but it's just a concept, and there's really nothing behind when we would use it, how we would use it. Are we going to force people to retreat at some point in time, or is it going to be a voluntary program? How would we fund it? So I think those are a lot of important things that need to be rolled into it. And it's not only the resilience department, but that would involve planning, zoning, a lot of other parts of the city's administration as well to put together an ordinance like that and really have something comprehensive that means something at the end of the day. Because we are talking about not an immediate, but a long-term strategy on how we're dealing with sea level rise. I don't know if that's what you were thinking towards.
Yeah, question to the city attorney. By the way, I think it's probably a necessary tool. How does this work with regards to eminent domain? Are we crossing into that line? So how does that work?
Well, that's, I think, where it's vital to kind of see what is being proffered, what change is being proffered, how it's crafted for the policy, but it could have eminent domain implications, but it could fall under a public purpose, which would authorize the city to exercise its eminent domain, possibly, depending on how it's crafted. And so just so, because I'm seeing, I guess, a question as to process. You, as the board, do have this authority and right to recommend changes to the city code or city policy. You could do this in two different ways. You could either pass a resolution saying the city should look into making this kind of code amendment. Or if you do want to be a little more hands-on, if you want to be part of that crafting of the policy, you could say, recommend the city, look into revising this policy and bring it back to this board to look and review, and then actually make that specific policy recommendation to the city commission. So there is kind of two ways of how you could go about it.
So I think that this is something that the Dutch, for example, have studied deeply with a lot of science and thoughtfulness about it. I think Jose's point is important to take seriously because I do think it's a necessary conversation. I don't think it's a tool. I think it's more as a strategy, and it's a very complex strategy. At the last meeting, I suggested that we consider learning more about the book that just came out. It's fresh off of the press, called Moving to Higher Ground by John Englander. And John is willing to come and talk to us. He lives in Boca Raton, and share with us his insight. He spent more than 6 years researching this book and learning about how communities are actually considering moving to higher ground. It's a serious issue. I think to just sort of say we need to put it into a toolbox option without really understanding a lot of the questions that come up, right? I mean, one of the things that happens with this future that we're facing is that it brings a lot of uncertainty and fear, right? And I think one of our responsibilities in this committee is to make sure that whatever action we may take, that we try to bring intelligence, science, thoughtfulness, to the way we lay it out, right? We understand that the politics are complicated, right? We have a city commission sometimes that cannot agree on basic, like this is blue kind of decisions, right? We want to make sure that whatever we bring to them is carefully thought out. So I would suggest that this is sort of the beginning of this conversation and that we invite some experts that could come and inform us on some thoughts that we could start to learn and formulate, strategies. People are going to ask, so what part of the city of Miami are you going to start retreating from, and why? I mean, what's the criteria, and how do you evaluate land? Are you going to take over land for what reason, and how you do that? I mean, I'm a believer that we are to design a new Miami, a Miami of the future that's elevated and protected and resilient, and that's sort of a more sort of optimistic approach to a city on the coast. And one could argue that starting the conversation of retreat right now is sort of surrendering to something rather than to sort of face it with ideas and strategies. John, in his book, he talks about the psychology of people sort of wanting to stay in a place, and that's an interesting conversation as well, that I think we need to consider, because I think there are a lot of people in Miami that sort of fear this future, but also are looking for leadership on how do we stay here, how do we build a city that really could stay and not necessarily retreat. One of the things that he talks about is the expense of having to relocate coastal cities. And where do you relocate to? I mean, if you look at the news every day, okay, there are fires and drought and extreme weather everywhere. So where do we go? And that's an interesting question that will come out of this conversation of sort of retreating or moving to higher ground.
So I very much agree in terms of the need to engage with experts, and Dr. Mock, who authored that paper, I invited her to present at this meeting. She couldn't, she's on travel, but she is available for the next one. I do think that this is part of this broader conversation, and I think her paper does a really good job. I think the topic of retreat tends to get demonized, it tends to bring out fear, and really in her paper, she frames it in a much more empathetic spoke of the wheel of different adaptation strategies. And I think we have a responsibility, and I've spoken to some of our commissioners about this subject, and they panic about it because they think the optics are obviously really bad. But I think we have a responsibility to sort of change the narrative. Managed retreat does not need to be a defeatist thing. It's a strategy that fits within all the other things that we're doing. And to Jose's point, you can have a very specific situation where it's a tool that is called for. And I think that that's really what we should be having conversations about and trying to learn about it, is how can we use this in specific targeted ways. And I think that the conversation about retreat in general will probably be something that occupies this board for the next 5 to 10 years if we continue to exist. I think the point that Jose's kind of bringing up is more that we need to initiate that process by having this be a subject that we discuss and that the city staff commission talk about. And then what I agree with you, Ronaldo, is that in that process, we have to bring in the experts. And I think we should bring in, if we can bring the author of that book, would be amazing. And then we can start really getting granular in the specifics. But we have to start somewhere. So personally, I would be supportive of, I'm still a little unclear in terms of what process, Jose, you think would make sense, maybe giving Alan and his team an opportunity to kind of develop something and come back to us, or what do you think is the best path forward?
I guess it's an issue of bandwidth. I think a simple resolution at least will make it a conversation at City Commission, whether it's deferred, brought down, withdrawn, or we can work here diligently. But I don't think we have the power to recommend an actual ordinance. We can't present an ordinance, right? I know PZAB did that once.
No, I would say it does, because the code specifically states that this board shall recommend changes to city policy and city code. So you could have that to recommend. Now, again, it does not have the same force. PZAB, it's because it's a extrajudicial.
Right.
This is advisory.
They used a roundabout way of doing it. So as far as creating an actual ordinance that would have all of that language included, I don't think we have those powers. So we could add the actual language. I'm sure Alan can give us the blurb for it. as one of our, it would be climate strategies, so adding it to the code
It would get added into the climate ready strategy.
and then in chapter 62.
Probably 22-5.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
Late.
we're tracking.
Yeah. So it'd be a simple resolution of support of it, a recommendation to the city commission.
Would you like to propose that tonight?
Sure, if I can get a little help from my colleagues over to my left. So it would be a recommendation to the city commission to amend the code to include managed retreat. And Alan, would we denote where it would be included into the climate ready strategy?
I was about to say, we can actually reference what is already in the, it's just a policy and a strategy. Say, as
referenced in the climate ready strategy.
Or as contemplated.
As contemplated in the climate ready strategy. And
develop guidelines and procedures for when it would be implemented and how it's implemented.
So moved.
Could we get a read back just so we can sort of hear it in its final form when you're... No,
1 second.
Take your time. While they're talking, I would say I think the subject like this requires engagement, not just with their community, but with our commissioners. So I recommend that everyone on this board engage with their commissioners. I'm setting up meetings with each of our commissioners over the next 4 weeks, and this will be something that I bring up, especially in the context. I really love Dr. Mock's paper. I think it does a really excellent job. I think the book that you're bringing up, and I think educating the commissioners so when this comes before them, they understand in the context of why, that this is not a defeatist, we're running for the hills thing. This is a strategic tool. I think that will really help them when it comes before the commission. So I'm certainly planning to do that with all of our commissioners, and I encourage everyone to do the same if this ends up passing.
Can you share the published paper?
I can, yeah. I think Miriam sent it out, but I'm not sure if I sent the PDF out, but I'll definitely circulate that again. It's certainly worth a read. And we're going to try to have Dr. Mock present at our next meeting as well.
And Reynaldo, can you also share the book? I didn't write it down.
Yes, Moving to Higher Ground by John Englander. It's on Amazon. I agree with you, Patrick, but I think that before we bring something to the commission, we should give it some more thinking than to just sort of put something out there that is going to ignite a complicated conversation. And this is only like the second time we've only, sort of superficially discussed it, because this is complex.
I think we could spend... It's so complex, I think we could spend the entire year just talking about this very one subject. My position on it is that I don't think that as a board we're going to, I think this is far outside our areas of expertise in terms of the nitty-gritty specifics of application. What we're proposing is that the conversation begins and that then it is then left to experts in their various fields to then, and we can, I'm sure a lot of these issues will come back to this board as we're discussing them.
So, Alan, sorry to put you on the spot. Has there been any federal monies that have been related to retreat? Maybe not already, maybe contemplated or already passed or even in the discussion of?
Within Miami-Dade, no, but I will say within the Army Corps of Engineers program dealing with coastal storm surge risk reduction measures. That is one of the tools that they do use up in New York after Hurricane Sandy. They did use eminent domain and forced managed retreat in some areas to reinforce the shorelines. So they did pay for it there. Within the Back Bay study here, it is a tool that could be used, but they did not see a need in the way they formulated it to use it. But it is a authorized use of that project if it does get authorized.
So, God forbid, we get slammed with a major hurricane and we have FEMA money coming in. Could we use any of that money for Manager Tree?
Yes.
So,
And they did in Hurricane Sandy, where they bought out houses in order to build reinforced shorelines.
There's a motion, so it's on the table, right? So we have to, City Attorney?
And I'll go ahead and read it into the record. A resolution of the Climate Resilient Committee recommending an amendment to the city code to include a city policy for managed retreat as contemplated in the Miami Forever Climate Ready strategy, which will develop guidelines and procedures for implementation of said city policy.
do I have a second?
Second. Okay. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
So we have 1, 2, any abstains? No? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 1 opposed, is that correct?
2 opposed.
2 opposed.
We should do a roll call, and
Okay.
we can't do abstentions unless there
Okay.
is conflict of interest. Miriam, could we do a roll call for this vote?
Opposed.
In favor?
Excuse me, I believe that you can also vote to allow me to vote online.
Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of. No, there's no voting by proxy. per
Yeah, I'm-
statute.
so we're getting a no on that, Amy, from the city attorney.
Okay.
In favor?
In favor?
In favor to start the conversation.
In favor?
In favor?
Motion passes.
Thank you.
And I'll just, I think, just reiterate that these subjects can be polarizing, they can be complicated, and as a board, we have a responsibility to communicate, to be engaged, so let's make sure we do that in the next couple of months, engage with your commissioners, and let's start having some really interesting conversations. So, we are falling a little bit behind, but great, interesting stuff. I think we're on to staff updates.
I will keep it very quick. We are still working on the greenhouse gas reduction plan. We will be having some workshops next week dealing with the new economy portion of it. And then the plan is to have the next version of the entire greenhouse gas plan by September, which hopefully we'll be able to bring to commission. And of course, we'll be sharing with the public too as we're getting to that point. But
I believe there was email with registration, the registration for the GHG event. I registered, I hope everyone does. And is that next week, is that right?
yeah, it was supposed to be tomorrow night and Wednesday night, but we had to delay it a week
Okay.
for some internal coordination.
Okay, will there be another email invite sent out, or does the original registration cover you if you've already registered?
I will turn over to Alyssa,
Okay.
who is managing the whole project and can talk much smarter than I can on how it's going to be run.
Hello? Okay. So we're releasing the draft on Monday, July 19th, of the new economy analysis and related actions that are a part of the greenhouse gas reduction plan. The week after, on July 27th, we'll have our first info session, which is during the Resilience Action Group meeting, or Resilience Action Forum, rather, sorry. That's at 3 p.m. There's a second opportunity the day after, Wednesday, July 28th at 6:30 p.m. So it'll be about a 15-minute presentation with our consultants at AECOM, and then open question and answer for the community. And then that is related to a public comment period. We'll have public comment open for 3 weeks, July 19th to August 8th. There'll be a Google form on the website for the project, which is miamigov.com/GHG plan. So people can fill out their comments for us, so that way we can make updates that will be included in the final version of the plan, which is going to come out in September.
Excellent. Will you be recording that presentation in case one of us can't make it, if we wanted to watch it virtually afterward?
Yes, so we record the Resilience Action Forum every month and post it on YouTube, so that will definitely go up, and then we will record the second session and likely post that on YouTube as well. And then those links will be put on the miamigov.com/GHG page on the sidebar so people can access.
Answer your question?
Yeah.
So you may know, is the city taking any action to install any level 3 chargers anywhere in the city?
So one of our action areas in the plan is to increase the amount of chargers in the city. One of the actions related to that is that we want to work on a citywide kind of master plan of ideal areas. An opportunity that came up recently, FPL approached us about citing level 2 and DC fast chargers in the city where they would pay for the installation. So that's something that we're exploring right now and giving them proposed locations and working out the legalities of that. But we've been approached with that opportunity. Other companies have approached us with the opportunity as well to pay for the install of chargers, both level 2 and level 3, the DC fast chargers. You know, if they'll pay for the install, you know, then they can work with us on revenue share or whatever. So I think there's a lot of opportunities coming up in that space for partnership with people with these charger companies. And that's something that we're working to prepare ourselves for. And that was the impetus for having that kind of master plan of key locations. So when people come to us, we can say, this is our wish list of locations.
So just for the record, for those of us that are starting to learn about having to charge our cars, there's no level 3 charger in this part of town. The closest one is in Dayland and in Walmart in North Miami. So, you know, it's like Brickell City Center has chargers, they're all level 2. So, you know.
Right. So yeah, the proposal from FPL is DC fast chargers and level 2s with an emphasis on the DC fast chargers or the level 3s, whatever. It
would be great for the city to take initiatives and really promote that, you know, as a municipality, you know, that is trying to be forward thinking.
Yep, we agree.
So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for that update. I look forward to the presentation. Any other staff updates, Alan? Cover it?
Not at this time.
Okay. So our next item is committee member updates, open discussions, other items. I would like to make it a habit for us, again, each of us to have, you know, a pet project, a specific initiative that we're working on. I know we're short on time tonight, so maybe we don't have the opportunity. We have a new member with us as well. So I'm just gonna, I think for the sake of brevity, maybe we don't need to have those discussions, but I would press you and I'd like to make it a follow-up action item to make sure that everyone has an item they're working on. Myself, I'm doing some work on some septic tank stuff that I can report on later. I know that Ronaldo, you were doing some stuff with the Miami 21 action group was looking for some tips. You were working on those. Amy and Nikosi are working on some off-state meeting stuff, and then maybe Nikosi, I don't know if you have interest in doing some heat stuff related to kind of some of the conversations we had tonight, with what could be really, really cool. And Jose, I had you on here talking about retreat, but it looks like you've followed through with that. So now you need a new project.
On what?
On managed retreat. That's what I had you on.
Okay.
But I guess that's probably going to open up a huge can of worms that'll probably keep us all very busy. And then
we expect a full report from Jose on strategy. Okay.
I will give in 2015 at COP21, I was asked by the Mississippi Compact where we were retreating to, which I answered there's nowhere to retreat to. So we have to get good at mitigation and remediation.
Yes. And for Avra, I think as a new member, love to get you thinking about all the amazing work that you do that is well beyond my understanding, and the same with you as well, Wayne. You guys represent such an important part. I think a lot of times on the committee we can get when, you know, we're talking about water quality and more sort of like sciencey based things, sometimes it feels like we can lose sense of some of the real world challenges associated with development, business, all these things. So anything that you think, an issue that you think you really like to push forward, would love to hear it. And the same goes, I know, for Robert and the remaining members. But we have 2 months off, so we'll make it an agenda item for our September meeting for each of us to get a couple minutes to discuss some ideas. You don't have to have something formal, but spitball some ideas, and hopefully we can drill down on something specific and keep pushing that momentum into the fall. Any comments? Yeah.
Yeah, so I know we're running tight, but this is of great urgency. So we're always hoping that we're building an elevated city that is more resilient and we're reducing risk, right? So today we had a brief presentation. Unfortunately, the communication was difficult with the FEMA map change. And the reason I wanted to have that conversation was that right now, everybody approving projects, right? And the city continues to approve projects every day. I don't know how many billions of dollars. Some of those projects may actually be under-designed when it comes to the future of this map, right? And sometimes you find out, as a developer, as an architect, as a designer, that there's a map change, that it may be significant to your project. Like I had a project in Naples that was basing itself on a FEMA report from 2018, and I suggested they talk to the floodplain manager, and I see the City of Miami floodplain manager sitting here with us today. And when they investigated the situation, we were told, look, FEMA would want this project to be 2 feet higher, right, instead of 8 at 10. The developer immediately decided to go into that direction because they saw the value in that and the risk reduction that came through that decision. And I think that that's something that is happening every day as the city continues to approve new projects, evaluate new projects in our coastal region. And I think that perhaps we may have the floodplain manager come back to us and maybe give us a case study and sort of say, look, these are the areas of the city where we're looking at where there's going to be a greater impact. Sort of understanding the future of this map as we know it now, because there's actually an app where you could go and say, I'm here now, so what am I now? What am I going to be in the future? And that future projection is important as we plan projects along the coast for greater increased resiliency and reduction in risk, which means insurability and value.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up. I think, I don't know, the FEMA map presentation, I think, was one we're all really looking forward to, and I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. So it was unfortunate we had the technological problems. I wonder, because, I mean, I don't think, we probably want to sink our teeth into this a little bit before our next meeting, which is in September. I wonder if the gentleman who is giving the presentation would be willing to record his presentation and send us a video, and then we could offline all submit our questions of that presentation to Miriam, and that might help us move things forward between now and our next meeting. Is that a reasonable strategy solution?
What I was suggesting was a little bit more sort of focus on the specifics of the City of Miami. Our staff, our floodplain manager, could probably study this and come back to us and say, look, I selected 3 sites, and in these 3 sites, this is how the new FEMA map may be impacting the elevations on these sites. Again, it's a way of creating awareness in the design and development community to make sure that people are looking ahead and are not sort of falling short of planning for greater resiliency and elevation. I know elevation, for those of us that are not architects and designers, it's like, oh, what does that matter? But it's of great concern to make sure that we're building a city that has a greater elevation.
So I understand the request is perhaps as an agenda item on the next meeting, a presentation that looks at specific areas where a change in the elevation I don't think zoning is the correct term, but will change the status?
We already know where the low areas are, right? We've mapped that as part of the storm water management master plan. We have a very careful topographic map that we didn't have before. And now staff could sort of say, well, these are the low areas and these are the areas that, we need to be more sensitive to when it comes to that FEMA map change. So let's say we select 3 areas and we look at them. One area may be more commercial, more diversified, more mixed use. Some areas may be more residential,
I think it's a great idea. So I think we can, yeah, Arba.
I actually think that's a great idea. I think maybe it is a building department checklist or a planning and zoning, because I know when I go in, gosh, even before I pulled my building permit, they told me to raise the building another foot, right? What is that checkbox? Is planning and zoning looking ahead at the map? And maybe there needs to be a little more attention to that checkbox.
Abra, I think that I could assure you that there's probably no information process right now to message that out when people are starting their early planning processes. And that's one of my concerns, is that you find out late into your process, in my project, I was still sort of in schematics and entering into design development. I was able to add ramps and modify the way we transition. There are projects that are already in permitting, and then you have to elevate a few feet. It's a greater change, right? So it's just a matter of creating an awareness, a methodology to inform the public that I think the city needs to start to implement. And I think we're the committee to try to promote that and to bring that level of mindfulness and thoughtfulness to that process.
So I see sort of 2 action items here. I personally would still love to see the FEMA presentation, and I'd rather not wait until September. Is it possible, do you think, that we request a virtual version?
We'll make contact with him. I think he's given that presentation a couple other times. Perfect. And we'll see if we can get a recorded version of it. Of course, if he did it, it would be voluntary.
Sure.
We don't have any control over FEMA, but we were in one earlier today with him that was about 2 hours long. That may have been recorded, and if so, we'll get you a link to it.
Okay. So all the committee members pay attention to your emails, and if we can get a virtual meeting, please, if you're interested in the subject, you have expertise in the subject, watch it, and then submit your questions to Miriam. That's sort of part 1. And then part 2 is more to what you were saying specifically about, we'll make sure it's, I think, an agenda item for our September meeting, depending on how, we like to keep a theme with each meeting, but where we would request a presentation on areas within the city whose flood categorization, I'm probably using the wrong term, would change with the new FEMA flood mapping. Is that a good way to put it?
Sort of taking a deeper dive into how this new map is going to affect the coastal region, the low areas more specifically. We know that Brickell has a high ground area, so we don't need to worry about that perhaps yet. But, and forgive me because you're sitting back there, and I know that, like usually if I'm setting the base flood elevation in a project, I collaborate with him and say, hey, what about this, what about that? And he probably has great ideas to share with us in a short presentation that we could learn from.
I think it's a great idea. It's very forward-thinking. So we'll make sure we get that on the agenda. I haven't looked at the agenda for the next meeting, but hopefully we can build it out. Okay, any other items anyone would like to discuss before we move on to public comment?
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify something. For the next meeting in September, it's not going to be here in City Hall chambers. So we're going to try to locate a place, but just remember that it's not going to offer the same facility for Zoom meetings or live communication.
Okay, so we might have some restrictions, but we'll cross that bridge as we get there. We might have to push that type of presentation to the following one if it requires the technical capabilities of the building.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I have a question with
Absolutely.
regards to the unfortunate tragedy in Surfside and how that's now affecting our community, both from inspection and construction. Is this committee planning on, or are you planning on asking the administration if we should be involved in future changes to the inspection process, as well as how are we going to manage the current building and our current infrastructure and what's being impacted? It would seem that this committee should have a role, since we serve 2 different committees as the Climate Resiliency and Shoreline, but we're not meeting until September. I'm sure the city is going to be taking some action and reviewing their code and their inspections before then, but I think it's something we should definitely weigh in on.
I think it's a good point. That's certainly outside my specific area of expertise, but I wonder if anyone else on the board has opinions on this.
Well, as we know, our mayor at the county level is implementing all kinds of strategies, with incremental concerns of inspections and process related to this structural integrity concern. So I would ask perhaps we reach out to Jim early and see, because I know Jim and his colleagues have a strategy already at the county level, right? I've always sort of thought the county has greater budget and a greater footprint. So let's learn from what they're doing and see how we could, engage in that without reinventing the wheel. So I agree with Wayne. I think we should be concerned. I think we should be part of the conversation, but I think this is moving fast. I mean, that criteria is being developed very fast right now to improve the way that we inspect these buildings and the certification process.
Yeah, I've already received notices for my buildings. I don't see it as a, I think there's other departments that are probably more qualified. It's really, it's an engineering, it's really
the
an
building department, the
engineering.
structural inspectors, all these guys are really on this.
Yeah, it's an engineering issue.
And they know what the problem is, because I think basically condominium boards have had too much, autonomy and very little oversight, it seems, but.
Yeah, I'm sure we all have very strong opinions about it, but I think, hopefully, I think the city and the county are really, trying to be on top of it, for sure.
There could be, I wonder, and again, I say this as it being very much outside my area of expertise, there may be areas of overlap that might fall within the type of stuff we cover as it relates to resilience. We cover so many different topics. Trying to think of what is the best path forward. Obviously, two months is a long break. I'm always willing to workshop something if we want to get together and drill down on something more specifically. Wayne, what do you think might be the best next steps in sort of trying to find out the best, most effective, most appropriate way for us to contribute?
Well, I think as we've discussed, that the county and the city obviously are moving forward on this topic, but I'm not sure how much expertise they have in evaluating, sea level rise and its impact. What are they going to do with current buildings? I mean, this is a public forum, so it gives the public an opportunity to weigh in on their concerns. It's going to change a lot of things. I mean, people who live in condos or even office buildings are going to have potentially major expenses going forward. And I think it's something that we should work together to find out what the city is doing, as well as the county, and then bring back some of the issues here that we should probably openly discuss and hopefully be part of the solutions to future problems. I think that just looking at the code and planning or building better for the future is one thing, but what are you going to do with everything in our built environment already? And a few years back, I represented a client who bought 2 hotels on Miami Beach on Collins Avenue. And I advised him to do ground penetrating radar because even though the buildings had passed inspection, they were very old buildings. And he hem and hawed because he didn't want to pay the money, spend the money, but ultimately he did. And we did the ground penetrating radar and some other investigation, and we found over $1 million worth of damage in the substructure that the city wasn't even aware of. So I just think that we as a collective group can probably bring good ideas that we can share with staff and the city. I mean, that's our job. I mean, that's what we've been doing. And it may relate more to resiliency and sea level rise, but I do think it's something we should be very cognizant of and be involved in.
Absolutely. Do you, in terms of just specifically next steps, do you think that something you'd be interested in looking into and then reporting back on what you kind of, whether it's an agenda item for the next meeting or?
Staff can help us find out what is the city doing, are they having any meetings, and would we be allowed or someone from this group to attend? And then bring back some of those issues or participate in their discussion. Okay. I think that would be a good start.
So I think
I wanted to add one thing because it's a very, very complicated issue, but a lot of it is really on with the state and the private, the private property. So the city accepts a recertification from the property, which is approved and done by it could be an architect, it could be an engineer, it could be someone who's, an architect is not a structural engineer, but he signs off on the structural engineer, the structural engineering plan. And these are these glaring defects that exist that the city can't say this is wrong because of that. You know, we're not the ones doing the inspection of the recertification. So we don't, and unless we are told, which I know that now the building department, you know, when they get a complaint, they send someone over there to inspect, but we're not knocking on people's doors and going in. So it's, as far as for roles, there's gaps in there. And I think that's just, it's part of the conversation.
So I think, correct me if I get this right, I think, Wayne, what you're requesting is maybe our liaisons look into the issue and to report back to us if they see there are any appropriate opportunities for us to contribute the expertise that the board has as appropriate. Is that more or less sort of what you're suggesting?
Partly, I think, you know, we should be engaged, but they may not have all the knowledge in terms of, you know, how sea level rise may factor in. I mean, they're going to wait for all these engineering reports that we may not know exactly, but I can tell you in my law practice, I've seen where, you know, tidal flow is very different today than it was when these buildings were designed, the hydraulics and the engineering they relied upon. And we have, I think, knowledge here that we could share to give ideas. I also think that the inspection process is going to change. It's not going to be 40 years. And maybe certain things have to be done every 15 years and then a major one in 30. And using the technology, the recertification process doesn't even require you to do, you know, surface inspections. It's all visual. It's all by, you know, your eye. And if you look at what happened in Surfside, the reports that were done by Morbito Engineering, that certainly should have given someone rise to think there's something wrong underneath. I mean, having that kind of exposure in the rebar and the beams. And so I just think that we have, you know, knowledge in certain areas and might be able to share with staff. And I also think, like I said, this is a public forum, so people get to come here and address their issues and their concerns that we can then relay to the staff or commission. So I think that we do serve a purpose and that this is going to be a relatively big issue for the future. Yeah. And certainly unprecedented. You know, there's never been in my history of living here, a building that's collapsed. So now everybody's concerned, and it's a topic that I think we should weigh in on.
Okay. So for our follow-up, sort of two things. I would request, Wayne, if you could continue exploring this topic and anything that you think that we should be aware of, whether we should workshop something, whether we should add an agenda item, whether anything at all that comes up, first be sure to share it with us between now and September. And if we can maybe get it on the agenda, that's sort of part one. And then part two is, I'm not sure who the request would go to, but maybe Alan, in terms of feeling out areas and mechanisms by which we may contribute to what is likely to be an emerging topic of conversation in the context of resilience, sea level rise, and the subjects that we generally focus on.
I think this really falls under the authorities of the building department director and the building official. And so anything that you would recommend would probably go through their department, either captured in policy or ordinance, or be a recommendation to the county or the state from them. So I think that's really the starting point, would be those two people. Jose would definitely be part of that as well in there. And then see how to integrate with the things that they're already doing. I know there's a lot more going on that I'm not aware of. It's probably the biggest focus that the city has had over the last 2 weeks was how to deal with this huge issue. So we can have a conversation with them and then see where we go from there. But I think it absolutely is a topic worth discussing, and you bring a lot of expertise that, you know, the staff does not have. And so if there's a way to bring the two together, I think it's worth exploring further.
Awesome. Great suggestion, Wayne. Any other items before we open public comment? Okay. Open to public comment if anyone would like to speak. I don't see any. So that takes us, we can adjourn. I apologize we ran late, but I do think we had some stimulating discussion. It was productive, so I will try to be better at keeping it on time, but I appreciate everybody's patience.
Could I ask a post-meeting weird question? So what's the protocol for masks?
That's a good question.
Because
you look good in a mask.
I don't know.
It's a free-for-all.
When in doubt, I just wear one. But Do we need to do a motion to adjourn?
Sure, then for the minutes.
Motion to adjourn.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.